Jaguars officially have wrapped up preseason. This game didn't end on the high note that it could have, but the Jaguars wrapped things up with another win. They finished up preseason 3-0. This is the second undefeated preseason in team history. Not exactly a high mark or something that people are keeping a whole lot of stats of, but an undefeated preseason is still an undefeated preseason. You take what you can get, right? All right, Jaguars are getting ready to turn that page, head towards the regular season. Week 1 is against the Colts. There is a little bit of a gap between there. The big thing that's next for the Jaguars, they got to go from 90 down to 53, which are going to be some tough cuts. When we were watching this game, some of these young players really stood out. Yasir Abdullah had an interception. Eric Hallett, a guy who I had on my 53 roster when we released it earlier this week, he had a turnover that he forced. So there are a lot of guys that made their presence known. As we kind of look at it, there's a tough decision coming for that last wide receiver spot. I penciled in Jacob Harris. Thought that was the guy. But Tim Jones kind of thought otherwise. He had that big, long touchdown catch. This is the second year in a row that Tim Jones has showed up in the final preseason game and maybe earned himself a spot on the Jaguars' active roster when they make those cuts. I think Tim Jones is a guy who's going to pencil himself in. Another guy that I think is under the radar that's going to find a way to get on this roster is Caleb Johnson. He led the Jaguars in special teams tackles a year ago, and he is a core special teamers on every unit. I don't know how the numbers are going to work for him, but somehow I didn't have him on my 53, and I want to figure out how the Jaguars are going to get him on their 53. Caleb Johnson, too good at the things that he does for them to let him go. The Jaguars have had a lot of young players that have found ways to step up for them so far through this preseason. I'm going to put this out there, and it's going to sound a little wonky, but this Jaguars draft class, they drafted 12 players. Next year, as early as next year, we could see them have 5-6 starters from this rookie class, that current rookie players, a lot of young players. If the Jaguars find a way to open up what we're talking about, like a Super Bowl window where they're competing, this 2023 draft class may end up being the foundation of all of that, because the early receipts on these guys have been phenomenal, and if they continue to get better from there, sky's the limit. I mean, Anton Harrison, it looks like he is going to be an elite tackle in the NFL for the Jaguars, locking down that right side for years to come. And Antonio Johnson, he's a guy that I'm still trying to figure out how he fell to the third day of the draft. So we'll keep an eye on how those pieces come together. A lot of these guys are going to find their way onto this roster and probably be playmakers for the Jaguars this season and into the future. So there's a lot of reason to be excited. As we get ready to finally turn the page from preseason games that ultimately don't count to games that matter for everything that the Jaguars are trying to work for, these guys are excited because we all see the potential that this team has. The players know the potential of what could be this season if all the pieces come together as well. So we'll have plenty more coverage coming your way, but the excitement may not have even hit its peak for this Jaguars hype train. So it should be a fun ride the rest of the way.